So my title of my presentation is Building the Blue Sun, the underwater domain awareness and its place in an evolving world order. Essentially, what I mean by the blue sun is the way that I tend to see UDA is something that the oceans are dark to us, as a lot of speakers said. We can't see. We can see trillions of kilometers into the galaxy and see black holes forming in space and constellations, but we can't see where the sunlight stops under our water. Or if we can see, it's a very limited way. So the blue sun is a form of illumination of the underwater space, but it's also just like the sun provides solar energy. Energy is something that we really have to tap into in the underwater space, given the way that humanity is progressing. So this is again why is the ocean? We think of the ocean because we are terrestrial in a sense. We all were born in the ocean. Like life emerged in the ocean. The moment life came on land, it's like we're like, okay, we don't need to bother about the ocean. But 71% of the Earth's surface, biodiversity, food security, climate, monsoon, like the crops that feed us in India are driven by the monsoon. But where does the monsoon begin? It begins in winds off the coast of Africa that go over the Arabian Sea, then slam into the Western Ghats, and then luscious. And we have agriculture. So all of that is because of this interconnected system that rests a lot on ocean science, trade and technology, internet, finance, culture, livelihood, institutions, statecraft. All of this encompasses what is world order, essentially. World order, a set of institutions that work with each other, that ensure that stable structures, political structures, economic structures, cultural structures exist. And all of this, we have to look at the role of the ocean in ensuring that this is done. So the five areas that I'll be touching in my presentation is politics, economics, environment, demography, technology. And we go into deep into how all of these areas intersect with UDA, how that all of this intersect with the larger idea. But before that, we need to pull ourselves out of the biases that come because we walk on land. We are able to feel the land underneath us. We're able to feel the territory. But I'm not sure how many of you can swim. But when you swim, you understand that you don't know the volume that you're swimming around. You're engaging with a different medium as opposed to walking on land. And therefore, when you map territory into this fluid space, it becomes a volumetric space. No longer are you walking on a flow. You're entering a room, and essentially that's what I think that's something that I visualize is when people talk about NDA and or like they were looking at the surface of the shipping lanes. So imagine this room is the ocean. We're looking at the ships going over the surface and we're reading the sea floor bed, but we don't know what's happening inside the room. That's what we're missing out. So we have the surface and the bottom, but we don't know what's that volumetric space that leads to what it impacts our technologies, our statecraft, so much more. Again, I come from a political science background, so I don't know how many of you are with the literature of how states emerged in itself, which is that why do we respect another country's boundaries? Like why there's no, we say international law, but where did that international law come from? It came from the treaties of Westphalia, which were so basically Europe was fighting all the time, and Europe decided, okay, let's sit down, negotiate, and draw boundaries, and let's stop fighting. They had a 30-year war. This was the Holy Roman Empire and all of that. But look at the land, like it's landlocked. It's in the middle of Europe. This is a part of Germany, North Westphalia. It's a bit of, in the middle of Europe. So all their ideas about what a country should be, how a country should engage with another country, how to draw the territory, how to demarcate boundaries, all emerged from a landlocked continent in the middle of. So the idea within today's world order is essentially following a very land-centric Westphalian bias, is what I would say. When I contrast this with what I would just vaguely just term the Oceania, which is like, if we just immerse the blue space, how do we assert these territories? But what you see in the dark blue, that's the EEZ of every, according to the established international treaty. But you see, it's so much more harder to demarcate. Like look at China. Like China, you have a lot of countries that China says, no, I will draw a 9-dash line and all of this is mine. And then it gets really ambiguous. So how do we negotiate boundaries and politics and states when it comes to fluid spaces like that? So essentially, that's where we have to start, which is that underwater domain. As you can see, we have to start letting go of a land-centric understanding of territory, of states, of sovereignty, and see, because even if we have international treaties like UNCLOS and maritime law, we are very, very behind. We have to make sure the legal ambiguities, like let's say we develop technology for an underwater space, but where can you stop using that? Like, till where can you use that technology? Then what does the law say? What is the extent to which these geopolitics work? We have gray zone tactics, unattributed subsurface activities, submarine fiber optic cables. That's the Gulf rich. So that's where the whole state of Hormuz, if you look at it in the seabed, that's how it looks like. We tend to think of the ocean as a blank slate, but it's actually with its own crevices, its own valleys, mountains, ridges, and that's where Iran has placed its mind. That's where fiber optic cables that connect Dubai's commercial landlines, like commercial capitals, exist. And then you have this understanding of when we do engage with politics and safeguard in a maritime space, we have to see things of like public good, data sharing, technologies, security protocols, and things like Mahasagar kind of build on that. I'll go deeper into it into the presentation. This is just more theory about how what type of geopolitics are we looking at? Like what sort of theory? Like all of our thinking and ideas of what a country should be, of how a country should exert its sovereignty. It's very land centric, and as a country that's peninsular of India, we have this a big potential. So here also this is like the Indo-Pacific. You already have Chinese submarines from Pakistan here. You have Sri Lankan ports here. You have fiber optic cables that we go into later. You have choke points here. And this is the tropical ocean where none of the legacy. So all of the European technology has been made in these waters. It is closer to the pole and obviously cooler. It's colder. It does not see that much. And then when you apply it to this large area that we term the Indo-Pacific or the Indian Ocean, we are severely underprepared for the level of attention that it requires. Slightly, that's one Shanti thinks of how do we then look at a space like the Bay of Bengal, which is the largest bay in the world. Like, that's what I think like India is sitting on so much, that we can do. It's the largest bay in the world, and it's the ability to create a harbor here where you have Chinese incursion in this area, you have the Strait of Hormuz crisis happening here, you have the Diego Garcia American base somewhere here. So all of this is happening in a very tightly contested space. But then when you have like things like Shanti, Sagar, and then Mahasagar, and then the recently announced Shanti, is I feel like India really understanding the importance of creating these arrangements and coming together as nations. And we kind of think like, okay, the Bay of Bengal country is about water. Why is Nepal and Bhutan there? But that's where the Himalayas are. That's where the water basins of that feed all of our crops are. And once those water basins go from there, like they know how much ice is melting. And because of global warming, more ice is being melted. So that will change the estuarine saltwater thing. So it's all one interconnected system is what we have to understand. We can't just draw a boundary. And even if you're only looking at oceans, we can't only look at oceans and not look at rivers. So things like this is something that we should really understand in our conceptualization. Again, economics and the blue economy, second dimension, every single dot of line that you see is a ship. These are the shipping lanes, and this is how we stay. It's like these are the highways of the world. Like because we can't travel in like the goods that majority of the goods when you get an Amazon package has to travel across these worlds. Look at how tightly contested, how tightly packed all of these are. And this shows the importance that world trade. If we really want to trade with the world, how do we trade if we don't know where the trade is going through? Here, this is internet cables. All of these, we think of the cloud as something that is very like we can't really tangible. It's called the cloud from beginning. But all of these. The cloud is actually underwater data cables that run service to service. And then as Sir mentioned Tonga. So you have island, Pacific Island nations here, where you have just one cable running. You have one accidental cut here, the whole country's entire financial markets are they locked out of the financial system. You have transatlantic pipelines here. You have here as well a very all these pipelines, and these are also something that we also have to. Okay, we have these pipelines. Somebody has to take care of them. Who's taking care of them? A majority of submarine repair vessels are Chinese. So so it's like all our data is passing through this, and we're just like, okay, someone will take care of them. But then we have to realize, are we building the capacity to take care of our own pipelines of so just wanted to visualize, and all of these are underwater. All of these is cables, and all of this is like the shape of the size of a garden hose. that connects all of our countries. So that's what we're dealing with. Again, India, so you see here, Mumbai, Cochin, Trivandrum, Chennai, these are all connected. So this is what connects India with the world. Colombo, Lakshadweep, so the entire Lakshadweep chain is connected by just one BSNL fiber optic line to Kochi. So and we have post naval air stations and bases in Lakshadweep, in Andaman, and we see towards the Middle East. So these are the connectivity that we need to understand about how important these spaces are. When it comes to, so these are the undersea cables. Look, it's just like, it's not that big, but it's laid on the ocean floor. And we are assuming that people do not have the technology to go there and cut it up. But China just released a cable cutter that they debuted, and they said, okay, we have the ability to go down deep into the ocean and just cut cables. And not many countries have that potential, but that's where we are in a very geopolitically contested world. So protecting the physical, digital subsurface infrastructure, having maritime spatial planning, because there's going to be, if you're going to have offshore energy, you're going to have oil, you're going to have wind farms. How do they intersect with deep sea mining, shipping lanes, traditional fisheries? How do you attract blue capital? How do you get investments? And more than 80% of global trade goes to the ocean, and much more is left. So securing these global financial arteries is at the bottom of the ocean floor. And that's the importance that we really need to understand as we go ahead. World systems theory, again, the ocean floor is the final spatial periphery. The scramble for polymetallic nodules to feed the green transition. We talk about EV and green technology, decarbonized economy. You need minerals to build that. You need things like lithium. You need things like nickel. Where are they? Like, if they come from terrestrial, like either they're on a rainforest or it's severely under depleted, but they're also under the oceans in modules. Um, we understand that capitalism travels across the ocean. You have trade, connecting economies, and the importance of that sort of geographies when it comes to it. That I wanted to touch upon is also the third component, which is we have to think about the UDA as a blue MRI. So what does the MRI do? When you get into an MRI, it scans each layer of the human body or whatever living thing is there. So I feel like the UDA in itself, like our entire ocean or the entire planet is covered by water, and that water helps us live. So we really need to know how is the water doing? Like, is global temperatures good? Like, how are the Gulf streams? Like, now we know that we have a monsoon deficit this year. Why did that happen? What happens when the monsoon does not arrive? It's arrived so far for thousands of years, but now it's starting to change. Why is it changing? Well, what do ocean currents play? What about fishery stock? Because fishes feed 4 billion people. So if the protein intake of 15% of 4 billion people are suddenly depleted, how do we feed them? So these are things like temperature, ocean acidification, marine ecosystem. So we have to look at it layer by layer about this volumetric space of how is the planet doing. We have to understand how is the ocean doing, how is the river doing, how is the water doing, and these cables, currents. So that sort of diagnostic tool is what I feel UDA can become, because UDA, when it comes to environment and climate resilience, it can monitor subsurface environments. It can restore carbon sinks. Like the largest, I think, I'm not sure about the exact details, but we think about oxygen coming from trees and trees coming from the Amazon rainforest, like in a large number. But what about like across the ocean? There's also like you have a lot of plankton, you have phytoplankton, you have a lot of oxygen production within the ocean. You also have a lot of carbon sequestration happening within the ocean, where carbon gets trapped in the ocean. So if we really want to plan for the climate change or what to do, we can't just do it in the shaded areas here when the majority of the area is underwater. So preempting climate and the regenerative ocean governance. This is something that I was fascinated to learn about. And I think it would really go well with a country like India, which is that when you start protecting marine spaces, they grow back more. You don't even have to do anything specific. You just don't have to destroy. Like when you stop destroying a particular, or you introduce a marine protected area, the fishes come back, the reefs come back, and then the plant lives take over. And they regenerate at a faster rate than forests, because trees have to grow back and trees take time. But that's not the same when it comes to underwater spaces, because of the way they constantly evolve. And the reason I brought this up is because as Indians, we really love policy to have impacts and results. We want immediate results. We want to pass a budget. We want that budget to have results, and we want that results to show how good of a government we are. And I think ocean is the best place to try that. Like start investing and you get those returns. I think it's really good PR. I think it's good PR to show how you can regenerate spaces when terrestrially it's so much more harder. Uh, this is just, I want to visualize like when we think of the ocean, think of it like it's slate, like it's a blank slate and there's water there and ships go and there's fishes. It's entire mountains, it's sea mountains, ridges, so these things called sea mountains are very important because whenever you have a large ocean basin, it's not just a flat surface, it's populated with a lot of these like underwater volcanoes, earlier used to be volcanoes, sea mountains. So because of the sea mounts, the water, they go like this and then they hit this. So they go upwards. So because they go upwards, you have a lot of, I'm not sure about the science, I'm not a science student, but I know basically like because of the way that the geography of the ocean floor impacts ocean current, you have oxygen, you have phytoplankton, you have biodiversity, and these areas next to sea mounts, next to the areas of sea mounts are very rich in biodiversity. They serve like a oasis, like a desert, because the rest of the ocean is all super dark and all. So sea mounts is a little bit more light comes, a little bit more food comes. So it's like transit points. Like if you think of from an animal's perspective, it's like transit points to cover the ocean. Because otherwise they can't just keep swimming, indefinitely with no food and no light. So these sea mounts play an important role in keeping that sort of flow and connecting. It's like basically super high. It's like motors on the ocean floor for fish biodiversity. You have to simplify. So that's how the range. We had speakers talking about how diverse it is. Like if it's so diverse on land, we have valleys, we have creeks, we have plains, we have rivers, we have different geographical features. Now imagine that is only what 31% of the Earth's surface. So the rest 70% of the Earth's surface is so much more varied, so much more. It's just we can't see it. We can't see under this level. We can see this level and under this way. Okay, whatever happens, we'll eventually figure out is our idea. So when we talk about environment is also it's not like environment is a few people complaining that pollution is getting out of hand. No, we have to understand that ecological collapse is high politics, which is security. Like the entire theme of a state to be secure is the state has to be stable, it has to function properly, it has to be able to ensure food does not run out, it ensures a strong institution. So there, the environment and the way that environments can sustain life systems is critical state theory. That it's strategic state theory in that sense. And so ecological collapse, earth system governance, you're seeing like ecological exhaustion. As I said, we're like industrial whaling has wiped. Like I can go into how much of stats we've taken from the oceans because we just haven't been able to leave the oceans. Like industrial whaling has wiped out entire population of whales, and the it's just fascinating. The ocean. I can't put it into words because I remember when I talk about industrial whaling, I remember these. So these whales, they live around the age of a human, around 80 years, and they can communicate across ocean. They can communicate hundreds of kilometers because as someone said about snapping shrimp, the sound has to travel somewhere. Here, so in the Indian Ocean itself, so if a blue whale is like making a sound here, you can hear it all the way here because there are certain areas where the sound travels along with the ocean current. And not only do they make those clicks and sounds, each clicks and sound has its own meaning. Like, oh, there's food here. Oh, our family is here. And this it's called whale singing. So they're singing across oceans. And it's a whole language, it's a whole civilization. If you look at the way that these ancient creatures that have evolved, and they're the whales, if you think about it, are the mammals that they came on land and then they were like, no thanks, we'll go back to the ocean. So I think we should really take some points that, the way of life that you have. Again, people living around the coast, 4 billion people within 100 miles of the coast. These are all population centers. Tokyo, you have all the coastal cities here, New York, Seattle, and Africa is going to generation of the world. Like everything that we talk about the West being everywhere, like we speak English, we're dominated by Western culture. They are going to be a minority in the world. Like they're going to be less than maybe 20%, 15%. And the majority is going to come from these areas who are in the tropical oceans. 40% of the global population in the Indian Ocean, of the world in the Indian Ocean will by 2050. So that you have Indonesia, you have Australia, you have Madagascar, Africa, the Gulf, India. 40% of the world. So I think that's why the West does not want us to accelerate, because the center of gravity of world power is shifting to the global south, is shifting to the Indian Ocean, is shifting to India ultimately. Uh, so demography and human capital, the fourth dimension, is we need there are a lot of young people. There are not enough jobs. We need to recruit them. It's as simple as that. But we only look at job markets from a very terrestrial, again, the whole land centric bias. We think of engineering and we think, okay, yeah, we're doing engineering on land. We think of science, science on land. We're thinking of anything. We only think about wherever humans live, that's the only place that they can work, is our idea of mentality. But we have so many people. That's the reality. We have so many people. They have with so many skills. The human capital is extraordinary. But what do we do with this? So we have to understand that the youth demographic in India, in the global south, labor demand, you have offshore renewable energy, bioconservation, logistics. We need to transition coastal youth from vulnerable declining traditional fishing towards high value green and blue sectors through technical skilling. So this is like uh, an example that I want to say is we think of the Indian Ocean and we think of fisheries, and we know that we go to the Indian Ocean to fish and we take fish from the Indian Ocean. But if you look at the Indian Ocean, like here there's a lot of tuna, and there's also a tuna commission. I'm not going to details, but the tuna commission has mostly ships come from Europe. So they're fishing in our waters. They're fishing here, they're able to take all the tuna here, package it and tuna sells for crazy price. The deep sea fishing, things like that. Because we don't have the ability to fish in our own waters, we're allowing the global north to come and take resources. Like this is just a new form of colonialism, just not, they just should have, oh, okay, we can't colonize the land, let's go to the ocean and do the same thing. That's what we see a repeat of. And we have to understand that these jobs, these skills, these employment sectors, we have to understand the youth that's there in this area. You have youth discontent. I don't need to speak more on that. You have illegal migration, you have maritime piracy. How do you transition into a sustainable ocean-derived economic opportunities along tropical coastlines? We have so much people, young people with skills that are looking at job markets that cannot absorb them on land. And you have these oceans that are sitting right across there with opportunities that are right, with so much potential that we're not utilizing to the whole thing. Again, state-centric security, we see coastal communities are just victimized always. They're seen as people who are displaced by modernization projects. They're not seen as stakeholders of those things. And we think of this as, oh, okay, we're going to build a port. Let's, why do we have to care? Is a general sentiment. But the knowledge that traditional communities, these are coastal communities who have lived generations on the coast. They know the specific seasons, the specific seasonal patterns, where the fish are, where to protect. When you're doing any project, offshore wind farm, okay, whatever data you get from some Western consultancy group, they know what data are they relying on. When you have our own data sets, you have our own knowledge. Like when we talk about indigenous knowledge, how do we actualize that? We shouldn't just keep saying, okay, we have knowledge, indigenous knowledge here, but then how do we operationalize it? And that, when it comes to coastal communities and artisanal fishing, is such an extraordinary process that we can definitely talk about. Megaports, IR theory. Humanity 4 years into the ocean, as I said, people are taking note. Like people know the oceans are important. They are taking attention. But it's the people with the resources historically, it's people who are from the global north, it's people who have colonized the half of the world. And they obviously are not keen on sharing that technology, because why would they? For self-interest. Because the state will always protect their own state before it, like that's just it. You have a lot of technology that is going into the ocean. You have offshore, you have wind, you have energy, even data centers. Like we are talking about AI revolution. So AI takes a lot of water to cool its servers. But if you keep that data center, you keep it underwater, 60% of its cooling costs are gone, because water to hai, I just cool it. So already I think Microsoft has tested it and China has tested it as a commercial capability. But if we want to be an AI superpower and all of that, we need physical structures, not just the fiber optic cables, but also data centers that need cooling, that need sustainable cooling. Because if you go build them outside, and it creates a lot of more. How do we minimize costs while we develop? That's what we need to keep in mind. So technology is becoming like the fifth dimension, your technology and sovereignty. You have a northern technological bias, as was said by a lot of speakers. You have imported oceanographic hardware built for cold, shallow northern waters, and they think that okay, we do it in the fjords of Norway. You've seen those images; they're very calm, very shallow, very pristine. But then you come and use that technology, you come into the Indian Ocean, which is so much more warmer, which is so much more biodiverse, so much more crowded, so much more, there's its own unique characteristics, and those, obviously, the tech will not work. So what's the point of importing tech without getting the unique conditions of that tech in areas like the tropical ocean? Again, as I said, solution-driven architecture over hardware accumulation, aligning indigenous research and development, deep ocean mission, as we can see, bridging the north-south capability gap. We do not have the ability to entirely copy the West or at a scale at which the West processes. But what we do have is we have a foundation, right? We have things like a smartphone, we have things like coders, we have software engineers. So imagine a fisher person with like a smartphone and they can log whatever, like what is a fish area. They can log the salinity levels of the aquaculture farm. They don't need a very high tech thing, like that's what I think the West kind of likes to show that they have a lot of money, so we make super high tech and we're the leaders of the world. But India should realize that India has done it for a long time also, that we need to invert that and we need to indigenize it and do it. I don't want to say the word jugaad, but do it in a way that's cheap, scale, accessible, and suited to the local conditions, and low cost digital tools, self-service platforms. I think that there's so much potential in when it comes to technology, as because the technology is not neutral. I think there was a question earlier: why do you need liberal arts? Let's just do tech. But then to apply a technology in a society, you need to know the society. You need to know how people and communities function. You need to understand how will that tech work? Who will adopt that tech? How do we make that tech accessible? If the tech is not in a regional language in India and you're expecting everyone to understand an English interface, that's a critical oversight. No things like that can be understood if we look at technology in a more holistic area. So again, four pillars: you have maritime security, blue economy, environment, disaster management, science and technology. And the thing is, all of this that we talked about don't have to be spread out across the board. Built for an anti-submarine warfare can be useful for tsunami early warning systems and biodiversity monitoring. Acoustic models for naval sonar prediction can do ASW planning and sustainable dredging. So the same tech that's collecting data that can be used in so many ways can be utilized in such a way to make that underwater domain readable. That's the ultimate thing. If you want to govern a space, if you want to understand a state's capability, whether it comes to defense, whether it comes to making jobs, whether it comes to doing making jobs or using technology, any of these areas, producing energy, we need to ultimately understand that that world power is on the subsea space. Like this area that there are no humans currently, that we can't live, we can't breathe, we can't walk, but that's the key to our future, because we have to understand the potential and we have to understand that we share a relationship, because life emerged from the oceans. So we understand the criticality of these ocean systems, and we have to understand that if we have to have that relationship with the ocean. We have to understand how do we negotiate our existence and not treat it as a different thing. We have to integrate it. And that's why we have to understand that any country that wants to be capable, that wants to be independent, that wants to be Atmanirbhar Bharat or indigenous services, all these countries should embrace that coastline. And we are so fortunate. We have a peninsular sea, like two sides of India is covered by oceans. We have a sea, we have the world's largest bay, we have an entire ocean named after. No other country can say that, but we do. And what do we do if the ocean named after us is mapped more by Chinese submarines than our own, right? So that's where and not just mapped, but also the potential, the energy, the polymetric modules, the engineers who are unemployed now but could have been employed in a subsea sector, could have been employed in an offshore sector. What is the opportunity cost of us ignoring this sector? I think that's what we have to keep in mind, and we have to understand that whatever world power, whatever state projection, whatever society you want to be stable, to be employed, to be safe, to be fed, to have protein, you need to have the ocean. And that's where we come today, and that's what my presentation is about.